The final years. Paul Hogan's descent into isolation and forgotten fame. They say that fame is the last drug to leave your system, but for Paul Hogan, the withdrawal has been a slow, agonizing process that has consumed more than a decade of what should have been his golden years. This is the brutal story of how Australia's most beloved entertainer became a forgotten relic, abandoned by the industry that once celebrated him, haunted by memories of a love that destroyed him, and trapped in a prison of his own making on the lonely shores of Venice Beach. What happens to a global icon when the world moves on without them? How does a man cope with the knowledge that his greatest achievements are behind him, his family is estranged, and his body is betraying him with each passing day? This is not a comeback story or a tale of redemption. This is the unvarnished truth about the final act of a life that peaked too early and crashed too hard, leaving behind only shadows, regrets, and the echoing silence of an empty house by the sea. From the muscle-wasting disease that has left him frail and weak, to the crushing loneliness that drives him to wander the same beach paths, searching for ghosts of happier times, to the financial pressures that mock his once vast fortune. This is Paul Hogan stripped of all pretense, facing the reality that some mistakes can never be forgiven and some wounds never heal. Chapter 1. The House of Broken Dreams. The Venice Beach mansion that Paul Hogan calls home has become more mausoleum than residence, its rooms filled not with laughter and life but with the suffocating presence of memories that refuse to fade and dreams that turn to nightmare. Every corner of this sprawling property tells a story of what was lost rather than what was gained. Every photograph a reminder of relationships destroyed by choices that seemed right at the time but revealed themselves as catastrophic in retrospect. Paul Hogan remained in Los Angeles, continuing to live in the same old house in Venice Beach, a place that had once been their shared home but ever since Linda left had become colder and emptier than ever before, capturing the essential tragedy of a man who cannot escape the geography of his own devastation. The house was purchased during the height of Paul's success with Linda, designed to be their sanctuary from the pressures of Hollywood and the perfect setting for the romantic life they thought they were building together. Now every room echoes with conversations that ended in silence. Every piece of furniture reminds him of evenings spent in increasing isolation from the woman who lived beside him but grew further away with each passing year. The house now felt vast and empty, the sound of waves crashing against the shore echoing fragments of memories, creating a constant soundtrack of melancholy that serves as background music to Paul's daily existence. The Pacific Ocean that once provided romantic backdrops for sunset walks with Linda now offers only the rhythmic reminder that time passes whether you want it to or not. The second-floor balcony where Paul spends his mornings has become his watchtower of regret, the place where he conducts his daily ritual of searching the horizon for something that will never return. Friends said he still kept the habit of sitting on the second-floor balcony every morning, looking out at the sea as if searching for Linda's figure among the breaking waves, revealing a man trapped in a loop of hope and disappointment that defines his waking hour. The bedrooms that once bustled with family life and romantic possibility now stand largely unused, their silence broken only by Paul's labored breathing as he navigates stairs that seem to grow steeper with each passing month. The master bedroom where he and Linda once shared their most intimate moments has become a monument to loneliness, its king-sized bed a reminder of the physical and emotional distance that characterized their final years together. Even with being a national icon of Australia with a fortune exceeding $20 million, Paul Hogan could not fill the void of loneliness within his heart, demonstrating that no amount of money or fame can purchase companionship or heal the wounds inflicted by failed relationships and squandered opportunity. The living areas where Paul once entertained guests and hosted family gatherings now serve primarily as spaces for solitary reflection and the endless replay of conversations that might have gone differently, decisions that could have been made with greater wisdom, and moments of connection that were missed or misunderstood. Sometimes people caught sight of Paul quietly tearing old letters or smiling faintly at old photographs, simple moments that had become nothing more than memory, revealing the pathetic nature of his daily existence as he sorts through physical reminders of better times, unable to discard them but finding no comfort in their preservation. The kitchen where Linda once prepared meals has been reduced to the most basic functions, its elaborate appliances gathering dust while Paul subsists on simple fare that requires minimal preparation. The formal dining room where they once hosted dinner parties sits unused, its table set for no one, its chairs empty testimonials to social connections that have withered through neglect and the natural attrition that comes with age and isolation. The home theater where Paul once screened his own films for friends and family members has become a place of torture where he occasionally forces himself to watch Crocodile Dundee, wondering if the man on screen was ever real or simply an elaborate performance that convinced even its creator of its authenticity. The glory of his past was now just a distant memory, and he faced old age in silence, with no one by his side to share his joys and sorrow, summarizing the essential tragedy of a man who achieved everything he thought he wanted only to discover that none of it provided lasting satisfaction or meaningful connection with other human beings. The garage that once housed multiple luxury vehicles now contains mostly unused exercise equipment and storage boxes filled with memorabilia from a career that seems to belong to someone else. The swimming pool that once provided recreation and relaxation now serves primarily as a hazard that Paul must navigate carefully, his weakened condition making even simple household navigation a potential source of injury. Chapter 2: The Ravages of Time and Disease. The physical decline that has characterized Paul Hogan's final years is not just the normal aging process that affects all human beings. It is the accelerated deterioration that comes from stress, isolation, and the muscle-wasting disease that has systematically robbed him of the strength and vitality that once made him irresistible to audiences and lovers alike. Paul has been battling health issues including muscle loss and chronic pain, which have made his daily life increasingly challenging, but this clinical description cannot capture the daily humiliation and frustration of a man who once embodied masculine confidence and physical capability, now struggling with tasks that most people take for granted. Paul developed muscle atrophy. His steps slowed, marking the progression of a condition that has transformed the once robust entertainer into a frail shadow of his former self. The man who once performed physical comedy with natural grace now moves with the careful deliberation of someone who cannot trust his own body to support his weight or respond to his intentions. In recent public appearances, Paul appears thin and somewhat frail but continues to maintain the optimistic and humorous spirit that once made him a beloved figure. But this forced cheerfulness often seems more tragic than inspiring, as if Paul is performing his old personality for audiences who remember someone he can no longer be. The muscle wasting that defines Paul's current condition affects not just his mobility but every aspect of his daily life. Simple activities like opening jars, carrying groceries, or climbing stairs have become major undertakings that require careful planning and often result in exhaustion that can last for hours. Paul, now in his 70s, with silver hair and a frail body weakened by a cruel muscle condition, no longer had the strength to resist or fight for anything, capturing not just his physical limitations but the psychological impact of being trapped in a body that no longer responds to his will or supports his ambition. The chronic pain that accompanies his muscle condition has become a constant companion that colors every experience and makes simple pleasures increasingly difficult to enjoy. The beach walks that once provided solace and exercise now require careful timing around pain medication schedules and weather conditions that might exacerbate his discomfort. But perhaps the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional torment. Acknowledging that while Paul's body is failing, his mind remains sharp enough to fully comprehend what he has lost and what he will never recover. The cruel irony of mental clarity combined with physical incapacity creates a form of torture that no amount of medical intervention can address. The medications required to manage Paul's condition have their own side effects that further compromise his quality of life. Muscle relaxants that help with pain often leave him drowsy and disoriented. Anti-inflammatory drugs that reduce swelling can cause digestive problems that limit his already restricted diet. His battle with muscle atrophy caused his body to become increasingly thin and frail, creating a visual transformation that shocks people who knew Paul during his peak year. The robust, confident man who once filled movie screens with his presence has been reduced to a figure so diminished that old friends sometimes fail to recognize him on the rare occasions when he ventures into public. The progression of his condition has forced Paul to make numerous accommodations to his living situation. Handrails have been installed throughout his house. Special chairs and bathroom fixtures have replaced the normal furniture that he can no longer use safely. The swimming pool that once provided recreation has been equipped with safety equipment for a man who can no longer trust his strength to keep him afloat. Sleep, once a refuge from the problems of waking life, has become another battleground where pain and medication compete with exhaustion and anxiety to determine whether Paul will find rest or spend another night staring at the ceiling, counting the hours until dawn brings another day of managed decline. The impact on his appearance has been particularly devastating for someone whose career was built partly on physical presence and natural charisma. Recent images show an aging, lonely Paul Hogan, seemingly lost in memories of the past, but these images also reveal a man whose body has betrayed the spirit that once animated it with such vigor and appeal. Chapter 3: The Crushing Weight of Loneliness. The isolation that defines Paul Hogan's final years is not just the absence of company, it is the suffocating presence of silence in a life that once thrived on connection, performance, and the energy that comes from sharing experiences with others. This loneliness has become so complete and so consuming that it has transformed from a temporary condition into the defining characteristic of his existence. He lives quietly, staying away from the noise of Hollywood, only appearing in public occasionally. But this retreat from the world represents less a choice than a surrender to circumstances that have made normal social interaction increasingly difficult and emotionally painful.
Paul once confided in a rare interview with Australian media in 2016, his eyes somber, his voice quiet. "I once had everything: fame, money, family, and a woman I loved. But in the end, I lost the most important thing," revealing a man whose understanding of what he has lost has become crystallized into a single moment of devastating clarity. The daily routine that structures Paul's life is defined by solitude and the absence of meaningful human interaction. He awakens alone, spends his days alone, and goes to bed alone, with only brief interruptions from service providers, medical appointments, and the occasional visit from his son Chance that provide temporary relief from the overwhelming silence. He often spends late afternoons walking alone by the beach, a place where he and Linda once strolled together, laughing like the perfect couple. But these solitary walks have become exercises in emotional masochism, deliberate returns to locations that maximize his awareness of what he has lost rather than providing comfort or peace. Now only he remained, facing the silence and an unending sense of regret, capturing the essential tragedy of a man whose success isolated him from normal human relationships, and whose failures destroyed the extraordinary ones that might have sustained him through the difficulties of aging and decline. The house that was designed for entertaining and family life now serves as a prison where Paul is the only inmate, warden, and witness to his own deterioration. The rooms echo with his footsteps because there are no other sounds to absorb or mask the evidence of his isolation. Since the day Linda left, Paul Hogan never opened his heart to anyone else. He accepted a life alone. No noise, no scandals, no expectations of anything new, revealing a man who has chosen emotional numbness as protection against further pain, but at the cost of any possibility for joy, connection, or meaningful experience. Those close to Paul revealed that since parting ways with Linda, he has never opened his heart to anyone else. Brief relationships could not fill the void she left behind, indicating that Paul's loneliness is not just circumstantial but has become a deliberate choice born from the conviction that no new relationship could compensate for what he has lost. He refused every introduction, every possibility of new affection, demonstrating that Paul's isolation is partially self-imposed, the result of a man who has concluded that the risk of further emotional pain outweighs any potential benefits of human connection. At gatherings with friends, no one ever saw Paul accompanied by anyone other than his son, Chance Hogan.
the only child from the marriage that had fallen apart, revealing that even his limited social interactions are defined by loss and the reminder of what his personal failures have cost him. The conversations that Paul has with service providers, medical professionals, and casual acquaintances have become exercises in performance rather than genuine communication. He maintains the facade of the charming, humorous personality that made him famous while hiding the depth of his despair and isolation behind practiced responses and deflecting humor. The man who once made millions laugh through his comedy films was now left only with silence, an aging shadow, and a wound in his heart that would never heal. Summarizing the tragic transformation of someone whose professional purpose was bringing joy to others but who has become unable to find joy in his own existence. The technology that might connect Paul to the wider world serves primarily as a source of additional pain, providing updates on Linda's new life in Morocco, news about former colleagues' continued success, and reminders of a world that has moved on without him and apparently forgotten his contribution. Chapter 4: Financial Decline and Mounting Pressures. Behind the facade of Paul Hogan's Venice Beach mansion and the illusion of continued wealth lies a financial reality far more precarious than most people realize. The fortune that once seemed inexhaustible has been steadily depleted by legal fees, medical expenses, divorce settlements, and the simple passage of time without significant income generation, leaving Paul facing the prospect of genuine financial hardship in his final year. Even with being a national icon of Australia with a fortune exceeding $20 million, Paul Hogan could not fill the void of loneliness within his heart. But this figure, if it was ever accurate, represents wealth that has been steadily eroded by circumstances largely beyond Paul's control and choices that seemed reasonable at the time but proved financially devastating. The 8-year legal battle with the Australian Tax Office consumed millions of dollars in legal fees, expert witnesses, and related expenses that would have bankrupted most individuals. Even though the case was eventually settled, the financial damage was irreversible and left Paul's resources significantly diminished compared to his peak wealth. The generous divorce settlement provided to Linda Kozlowski, while morally justified given her sacrifices during their marriage, represented another massive depletion of Paul's asset. Property divisions, alimony arrangements, and legal costs associated with the divorce proceedings further reduced his available resources at precisely the time when his earning capacity was declining due to age and health issues. The maintenance costs associated with the Venice Beach property represent a constant drain on Paul's finances that grows more burdensome each year. Property taxes, utilities, insurance, security, landscape, and basic maintenance for a mansion of this size require substantial monthly expenditures that continue regardless of Paul's income or health condition. Medical expenses related to Paul's muscle condition and other age-related health issues have become a major financial burden that will only increase as his condition worsens. Prescription medications, physical therapy, medical equipment, and specialist consultations create ongoing costs that insurance may not fully cover, particularly for someone with Paul's complex medical needs. The complete absence of significant new income has transformed Paul's financial situation from wealth management to wealth preservation, but even the most conservative financial planning cannot indefinitely sustain the lifestyle and expenses that accumulated during his peak earning year. Investment losses during various economic downturns have further eroded Paul's financial position, particularly if his portfolio was not properly diversified or if he relied on advisors whose judgment proved questionable. The same financial complexity that enabled his tax optimization strategies may have exposed him to investment risks that have not paid off. The costs associated with caring for an aging, isolated individual are substantial and growing. Paul requires various forms of assistance with daily activities, property maintenance, and medical management that must be purchased rather than provided by family members or friends who might help in different circumstances. The psychological pressure of financial decline adds another layer of stress to Paul's already difficult circumstance. The man who once lived without considering costs now must evaluate every expense, every investment and every financial decision through the lens of limited resources and uncertain income. The Venice Beach property, while potentially valuable, may also represent a financial burden that Paul cannot easily escape. Selling a mansion of this size and specificity requires finding the right buyer at the right time, and the costs associated with maintaining the property until sale could outweigh any potential proceeds. The glory of his past was now just a distant memory, and he faced old age in silence, with no one by his side to share his joys and sorrows. But this description should include the reality that Paul's financial situation may force choices about lifestyle, living arrangements, and care options that he never anticipated during his successful year. The entertainment industry's tendency to forget yesterday's stars means that Paul has little opportunity to monetize his past success through appearances, endorsements, or new projects. The residual income from his classic films provides some ongoing revenue, but not at levels sufficient to support his current lifestyle indefinitely. Estate planning becomes particularly complex for someone in Paul's situation, balancing the desire to provide for his son Chance against the reality of diminished assets and ongoing expenses that could continue for many years depending on Paul's longevity and healthcare needs. Chapter 5: The Industry That Forgot. The entertainment industry that once competed for Paul Hogan's attention and participation has moved on with the ruthless efficiency that characterizes all businesses focused on current profitability rather than past achievement. The man who once commanded top dollar for his participation in projects now finds himself essentially unemployable, not because he lacks talent or experience, but because Hollywood has no use for aging Australian icons whose peak success lies decades in the past. Although no longer actively involved in the entertainment industry, Paul Hogan expressed a desire to complete one final project to thank his fans before officially retiring, but this desire reflects more hope than realistic possibility, given the industry's current priorities and Paul's diminished physical condition. The projects that do occasionally come Paul's way are typically low-budget affairs that trade on nostalgia rather than genuine creative opportunity. These offers often require Paul to essentially parody his former self, playing variations of characters that made him famous rather than exploring new aspects of his talent or experience. After Crocodile, Dundee 2, Paul Hogan's movies outside that genre were critical flops, and they were box office flops as well. I think he had typecast himself as Crocodile Dundee, and that's what people wanted to see him doing, revealing the trap that successful entertainers often face when their signature creation becomes their permanent prison. The younger generation of entertainment executives and decision-makers have no personal connection to Paul's peak years and view him primarily as a relic of an era they never experienced. His name recognition among contemporary audiences is limited, and his ability to generate the kind of opening weekend box office that drives modern film financing has essentially disappeared. The last movie that Dad and John worked on together was Almost an Angel, representing not just the end of a creative partnership, but Paul's final opportunity to work at the level of professionalism and resource allocation that characterized his peak year. Every subsequent project has been a step down in terms of budget, distribution, and industry respect. The physical demands of contemporary film production have become increasingly difficult for Paul to meet. Long shooting days, complex schedules, and the general pace of modern entertainment work are incompatible with his health limitations and energy levels, making him an insurance risk that most productions cannot afford to accommodate. The marketing and promotional requirements that accompany any film project have become particularly challenging for Paul, whose public appearances must be carefully managed to avoid highlighting his physical decline while maintaining the illusion of vitality that audiences expect from their entertainment icon. I think he had typecast himself as Crocodile Dundee, and that's what people wanted to see him doing. But the audience that remembers and cherishes that character represents a demographic that the entertainment industry considers largely irrelevant to its current commercial priorities. The international market that once provided Paul with his greatest successes has similarly moved on to newer personalities and different types of entertainment that reflect contemporary sensibilities rather than the straightforward humor and uncomplicated heroism that characterized his most successful work. Streaming services and digital platforms, which might theoretically provide opportunities for older entertainers to find new audiences, have shown little interest in Paul's work beyond licensing his classic films for nostalgic viewers. The original content being produced for these platforms skews heavily toward younger demographics and contemporary themes. The Australian entertainment industry, which might be expected to show loyalty to one of its most successful exports, has similarly failed to provide meaningful opportunities for Paul's continued involvement. The tall poppy syndrome that contributed to his tax troubles continues to influence how his homeland's entertainment community views his legacy and current potential. While time and health may no longer be on his side, Paul Hogan remains a vivid symbol of a golden era, but symbols are admired rather than hired, and the entertainment industry's appreciation for Paul's historical significance has not translated into current employment opportunities or meaningful creative collaboration. The reality of modern entertainment economics means that Paul's salary requirements, based on his previous success and current financial needs, are incompatible with the budget levels of projects that would be appropriate for his current capabilities and audience appeal. Chapter 6: Memories as Prison. The Venice beach house where Paul Hogan spends his days has become less a home than a museum of failed relationships and missed opportunities, every room filled with reminders of what was lost rather than what was gained. These memories, rather than providing comfort or satisfaction, have become instruments of torture that make it impossible for Paul to find peace in his present circumstances or hope for his future. Sometimes people caught sight of Paul quietly tearing old letters or smiling faintly at old photographs, simple moments that had become nothing more than memory, revealing a man trapped in a cycle of nostalgia that provides temporary escape from current reality but ultimately reinforces his sense of loss and isolation. The wedding photos from his marriage to Linda, once symbols of hope and new beginnings, now serve as evidence of promises that could not be kept and dreams that turned into nightmares. He felt lost looking at the wedding photos from Beverly Hills, the once happy videos now distant memories, capturing the torture of being surrounded by visual reminders of happier times that seemed to belong to someone else entirely. Paul never publicly revealed the exact conflicts that led to their marriage falling apart, but from what he shared, it was clear that he never truly forgot Linda. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Paul admitted, "I still think about her every day. Sometimes I wonder if I had changed a little, would she have stayed?" demonstrating how memory has become a form of self-punishment rather than a source of wisdom or acceptance. The house itself has become a shrine to Linda's presence, with Paul apparently unable or unwilling to remove the traces of her occupancy. Rooms remain arranged as they were when she lived there, her preferences in decoration and furniture still defining spaces that she will never occupy again. Night after night, it was only him and the shadow on the wall with questions no one could answer. Why did everything become like this? Did I love the wrong person, or was she simply better at acting than I knew? Revealing the obsessive nature of Paul's engagement with memories that provide no resolution or peace, only endless replaying of conversations and moments that cannot be changed or understood differently. The television and film projects that once provided Paul with professional satisfaction and creative outlet have become additional sources of pain when he encounters them accidentally on television or streaming services. Seeing himself as he was, young, vigorous, confident, successful, only emphasizes how far he has fallen and how much he has lost. The love I thought was heaven-sent turned out to be a deception, one that fooled my emotions, my career, and my entire life. Represents Paul's current interpretation of what was once the most important relationship in his life, but this bitter conclusion provides no relief from the pain of loss, only additional reasons to regret the choices he made. The beach walks that structure Paul's days have become pilgrimages to specific locations where significant moments occurred with Linda. Rather than avoiding these places, he seems compelled to revisit them repeatedly, as if physical proximity to past happiness might somehow restore what was lost. He often spends late afternoons walking alone by the beach, a place where he and Linda once strolled together, laughing like the perfect couple. But now only he remains, facing the silence and an unending sense of regret, indicating that Paul has turned his living environment into a constant reminder of what he has lost, rather than a space for healing or moving forward. The letters and personal communications that Paul occasionally reads and destroys represent another form of self-torture, as he revisits written evidence of love, hope, and connection that no longer exist. These documents provide temporary connection to happier times but ultimately reinforce the reality of current isolation. I gave up an entire lifetime only to end up living like a shadow in my own home. summarizes Paul's perspective on the choices that led him to his current circumstances. But this self-blame provides neither understanding nor relief, only additional weight to the burden of regret that defines his daily existence. The family photographs that show Paul with his children from his first marriage provide another category of painful memories, reminding him of relationships that were damaged or destroyed by his pursuit of romance with Linda. These images capture moments of connection and happiness that seemed permanent at the time but were actually fragile and temporary. Venice Beach at Dundee. The silver waves kept crashing against the shore as if reminding Paul Hogan of all the memories that had passed, creating a natural soundtrack for his daily meditation on loss that makes it impossible to experience the present moment without being overwhelmed by awareness of what is missing. Chapter 7: The Ghost of Linda Kozlowski. More than a decade after Linda Kozlowski packed her belongings and left the Venice Beach house forever, her presence haunts every room, every conversation, and every quiet moment of Paul Hogan's daily existence. She has become not just a memory but an obsession, a ghost whose absence is more powerful than most people's presence, defining Paul's reality through what is missing rather than what remains. Paul never publicly revealed the exact conflicts that led to their marriage falling apart, but from what he shared, it was clear that he never truly forgot Linda. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Paul admitted, "I still think about her Sometimes I wonder if I had changed a little, would she have stayed?" revealing the depth of an obsession that has consumed more than a decade of Paul's life without providing any resolution or peace. The daily ritual of searching the horizon from his balcony has become Paul's most pathetic and heartbreaking routine, a desperate communion with absence that provides no comfort but which he seems unable to abandon. Friends said he still kept the habit of sitting on the second-floor balcony every morning, looking out at the sea as if searching for Linda's figure among the breaking waves, capturing the delusional nature of hope that refuses to accept reality. Meanwhile, far away in Morocco, Linda Kozlowski is living the life she had always dreamed of, free and happy beside a man who loves her for who she truly is, not for the fame or image, providing the cruel contrast between Linda's successful new life and Paul's stagnant existence trapped in memories of what they once shared. The knowledge of Linda's happiness with another man has become perhaps the most devastating aspect of Paul's obsession, proving that she was capable of the kind of joy and satisfaction that eluded their marriage, but which she found almost immediately after leaving him. And not long after, she appeared beside a young local businessman, smiling brightly in travel photos taken across the Marrakesh desert, a stark contrast to the weary, somber figure she had been during her last years in America. Paul once admitted that regardless of having everything, wealth, and the admiration of millions, he still felt empty, especially without Linda by his side, demonstrating how completely his sense of self-worth and life satisfaction had become dependent on a relationship that no longer existed, and a woman who had clearly moved beyond whatever they once shared. In a rare 2022 interview, Paul Hogan opened up for the first time about his deepest feeling. With a voice full of regret, he said, "I once had it all: fame, fortune, and a wonderful wife, but in the end I still feel like I lost something most important," revealing that after nearly a decade of separation and divorce, Paul's emotional life remained completely defined by Linda's absence. The house that Paul refuses to leave has become a shrine to Linda's memory, with rooms apparently preserved as they were when she lived there, and daily routines structured around places and activities that recall her presence. This self-imposed imprisonment in the geography of lost love has prevented any possibility of healing or moving forward. That confession seemed like a belated admission that Linda was not just a wife, she was the only person who truly gave his life meaning. But by the time he realized, she had already left him forever, capturing the tragic irony of Paul's current understanding of what he lost, and his inability to accept that this understanding came too late to matter. The contrast between Linda's vibrant new life and Paul's stagnant existence provides daily evidence of the different ways people can respond to the end of relationship. While Linda used divorce as an opportunity for growth, adventure, and new love, Paul has allowed it to become a permanent sentence to loneliness and regret. There, Linda began a new chapter: real estate business, rebuilding the image of an independent woman free from the shadow of being Paul Hogan's ex-wife, demonstrating that Linda was able to use the end of their marriage as the beginning of a more authentic and satisfying life, while Paul remained trapped in the identity of her abandoned husband. The torture of knowing Linda's current happiness is compounded by Paul's apparent inability to wish her well or find satisfaction in her success. Instead of celebrating her ability to find the life she wanted, he seems to view her happiness as additional evidence of his own failure and unworthiness. Perhaps the price for blind love is not losing the one you loved, but losing yourself. Losing faith and leaving behind a hollow life with no one waiting, no one to return to. Representing Paul's current analysis of his situation, but this philosophical understanding provides no practical relief from the daily reality of obsession and loneliness. The ghost of Linda Kozlowski has become more real and present in Paul's daily life than any living person, defining his routine, his thoughts, and his emotional responses to everything he experiences. She haunts him not as a supernatural presence, but as the embodiment of everything he lost and can never recover. Chapter 8: The Final Countdown. At 85 years old, Paul Hogan exists in that terrible liminal space between life and death, where each day is both a reprieve and a burden, where consciousness means awareness of everything that has been lost and nothing that might be gained. His final years have become an extended meditation on failure, isolation, and the crushing weight of regrets that cannot be undone or forgiven. At 85 years old, Paul Hogan, the star forever linked to the image of a crocodile hunter in the Crocodile Dundee series, still captures public attention despite stepping away from the spotlight of Hollywood, but this attention has become more morbid curiosity than genuine affection, as people watch to see how far the mighty have fallen rather than celebrating what was achieved. Currently, Paul Hogan lives a quiet life in Los Angeles, USA. He has been battling health issues including muscle loss and chronic pain, which have made his daily life increasingly challenging. But this clinical description cannot capture the daily humiliation of a man whose body has become his enemy, betraying him at every turn and making simple activities into major undertakings. In recent public appearances, Paul appears thin and somewhat frail, but continues to maintain the optimistic and humorous spirit that once made him a beloved figure. But this performance of his former personality has become increasingly difficult to sustain as the gap between his public persona and private reality continues to widen. The rare appearances that Paul makes in public have become exercises in endurance rather than enjoyment, opportunities for photographers to document his decline rather than celebrations of his contributions to entertainment. Each public sighting generates new speculation about his health, his mental state, and his financial condition. Although he has lived alone since divorcing Linda Kozlowski in 2014, Paul revealed that he maintains a good relationship with his son Chance Hogan. The father and son often spend time together, sharing simple everyday moments, providing the only ray of light in an otherwise unrelentingly dark picture of Paul's current existence. The relationship with Chance represents Paul's final opportunity for meaningful human connection and his last chance to demonstrate value and purpose beyond the entertainment achievements that once defined his identity. But even this relationship is complicated by Paul's physical limitations, emotional damage, and the burden of being a father who must be cared for rather than one who provides care. When asked about his marriage to Linda Kozlowski, Paul admitted, "I loved her deeply, but sometimes love just isn't enough. We tried, but in the end, we couldn't walk the same path," revealing a man who has learned to speak philosophically about his greatest failure, but who has not learned to accept it emotionally or move beyond its devastating impact. In spite of once describing his 23-year marriage to Linda as a lonely nightmare, Paul also acknowledged that those years were the most beautiful time of his life, capturing the contradictory nature of Paul's relationship with his own history and his inability to develop a consistent narrative about what happened to him and why. The daily routine that structures Paul's life has become increasingly limited by his physical condition and social isolation. Medical appointments, physical therapy, prescription management, and basic self-care consume much of his energy, leaving little capacity for activities that might provide pleasure or meaning. While time and health may no longer be on his side, Paul Hogan remains a vivid symbol of a golden era. But this symbolic status provides no comfort to a man who must live in the reality of a failing body and an empty house, regardless of what he once represented to others or continues to represent in their memory. The knowledge that his own death is approaching has apparently provided no peace or acceptance for Paul, only additional urgency to the regrets and obsessions that have consumed his final decade. Rather than using mortality as motivation for healing or reconciliation, he seems to view it as the final punishment for a life mismanaged and opportunities wasted. His life story, marked by fame, tragedy, and lingering regrets, continues to captivate audiences worldwide, but Paul has become a spectacle rather than an inspiration. Someone whose decline provides entertainment value rather than meaningful lessons about life, love, or the human condition. The financial pressures that increasingly define Paul's daily choices add practical stress to the emotional and physical burdens he already carries. The man who once lived without considering costs must now evaluate every expense against diminishing resources and uncertain income. The medical management required for Paul's multiple conditions has become a full-time occupation that provides structure to his days but no satisfaction or hope for improvement. Doctor visits, medication schedules, and physical therapy appointments mark time but do not fill it with meaning or purpose. Although no longer actively involved in the entertainment industry, Paul Hogan expressed a desire to complete one final project to thank his fans before officially retiring, representing perhaps the last vestige of hope in an otherwise hopeless situation, though even this modest goal may be beyond his current capability. Epilogue: The Last Man Standing. As the sun sets over Venice Beach on another day in Paul Hogan's dwindling collection of tomorrows, the cruel mathematics of mortality become impossible to ignore. The bridge worker who became a global icon, who conquered Hollywood and won the world's love, who seemed invincible in his prime and invulnerable in his success, has been reduced to a cautionary tale about the price of fame, the cost of love, and the brutal reality that some mistakes echo through eternity. The man who once made millions laugh through his comedy films was now left only with silence, an aging shadow, and a wound in his heart that would never heal. Summarizing not just Paul's current condition but the trajectory of a life that peaked too early and crashed too completely for any meaningful recovery to be possible. The Venice beach house that has become his prison will soon become his mosque, its empty rooms and silent halls serving as testimony to opportunities wasted, relationships destroyed, and the inexorable passage of time that transforms all human achievement into memory and ultimately into forget. I loved her deeply, but sometimes love just isn't enough. Paul's final words about Linda capture not just the failure of their marriage but the inadequacy of all his efforts to build lasting connections with the people who mattered most. Love, it turns out, requires more than feeling. It demands understanding, compromise, and the ability to see beyond one's own needs and desires. The legacy that Paul leaves behind is complicated and contradictory, mixing genuine entertainment achievement with personal failure, cultural contribution with human cost. The Crocodile Dundee character will outlive its creator, providing joy and nostalgia to future generations who will never know the price that was paid for its creation. He often spends late afternoons walking alone by the beach, a place where he and Linda once strolled together, laughing like the perfect couple. But now only he remains, facing the silence and an unending sense of regret. And these solitary walks have become the perfect metaphor for Paul's final years, a man retracing steps that lead nowhere, searching for something that cannot be found, haunted by memories of happiness that feels like someone else's life. The children from his first marriage, grown now and living their own lives, represent relationships that might have provided comfort and meaning in his final years but were sacrificed to his pursuit of romantic fulfillment that ultimately provided neither romance nor fulfillment. Perhaps the price for blind love is not losing the one you loved but losing yourself, losing faith and leaving behind a hollow life with no one waiting, no one to return to, offering Paul's own analysis of what went wrong. But this understanding comes too late to change anything, or provide relief from the consequences of choices that seemed right at the time but revealed themselves as catastrophic in retrospect. The industry that once celebrated Paul Hogan has moved on without him, proving that fame is temporary, achievement is fragile, and the entertainment business has no loyalty to yesterday's star. The audiences who once adored him have found new favorites, and the world that once seemed to revolve around his charisma has discovered it can function perfectly well without him. The Australia that initially embraced him as a cultural hero then persecuted him as a tax cheat, and finally forgave him as an aging icon will remember Paul primarily for Crocodile Dundee, reducing a complex life to a single character and a few memorable quotes that will outlive everything else he ever did, or failed to do. Since the day Linda left, Paul Hogan never opened his heart to anyone else. He accepted a life alone. No noise, no scandals, no expectations of anything new, revealing a man who chose emotional death as protection against further pain, but who failed to anticipate the living hell that such protection would create. The final chapter of Paul Hogan's life is being written not in achievement or contribution, but in decline and isolation. Not in triumph over adversity, but in surrender to circumstances that he helped create but cannot control or escape. As the waves continue their eternal rhythm against the Venice beach shore, washing away footprints and memories alike, Paul Hogan sits in his empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of better times, counting down the days until death releases him from the prison of his own making. The man who once made the world laugh has become someone who cannot find reasons to smile. And the entertainer who brought joy to millions has discovered that success means nothing if you have no one to share it with, and nothing if you lose everyone you love in the process of achieving it. The end of Paul Hogan's story is not heroic redemption or graceful acceptance, but the slow fade of a man who lived too long past his relevance, loved too poorly to maintain connection, and gambled too much on dreams that turned into nightmares. His final years stand as testament to the truth that fame cannot heal loneliness, wealth cannot purchase happiness, and sometimes the cost of getting everything you thought you wanted is losing everything you actually needed.